Welcome, everybody. If you're still out there, I don't know if anybody's still outside, but come on in. Come on in, take a seat. We're very friendly. You probably figured this out by now. So I want to first of all start out by thanking everybody for coming. I know this is the last talk, and as our excellent room volunteer reminded me just a few minutes ago, I'm the last thing between you and freedom. So I'm very cognizant of that. I want to start off by saying a few things about this presentation. Like, some of you may have seen some other presentations I've done before, including here at RVAsec. I'm happy to say I'm a returning speaker. Some of my presentations can be a little bit on the technical side, but this is not one of them. There's another set of my presentations that I think are of more like how to think of things in a better, more effective way. And this is one of those. Like you see the subtitle, Shaping Adversary Behavior to Strengthen Your Defense. I'm solidly on the blue team, I will say. But there was a couple of talks here that I thought were especially relevant to this. So I just want to shout out to a couple people, a couple of speakers here this year. I don't even know if they're both still here, but the person in the I guess the FG room, part of this room, right before me, Q, gave an excellent talk on wasting red teamers' time constructively. And yesterday, I think El Marquez gave a really good talk that basically about APT with the Grimm's fairy tale kind of lens on it. And what I really liked about that talk was that it gave us a new way of thinking about what APT really means. So thanks to L and Q, both of you. It sounds like I'm at an MIB security conference. Agent Q, Agent L, thank you very much. So I have a question. First of all, my way is not very sportsman-like. Anybody recognize? Yes. Yes, it's Andre the Giant. It's Fezzik from The Princess Bride. I am super convinced it's the best movie ever made. Certainly one of the most quotable. If you're not familiar with The Princess Bride, you should be. I'm looking at my son. You should be. Yes, you will be. Just a quick refresher on this piece and why I think it's relevant to information security. You probably recognize these gentlemen on the screen, and I use the gentleman term loosely for at least one of them, right? You have, of course, there's, everybody say it with me on the left-hand side, Inigo Montoya, you killed his father, prepare to die. Yeah, and then in the middle we have Vizzini, right? Vizzini is the, I don't want to say mastermind of the group, but he's the leader of the group. And then, of course, on the right, we have Andre the Giant, Fezzik. So the reason that I chose this title is because I think it fits the theme of what I want to talk to you about. Like, the man in black is pursuing these three guys because they've kidnapped the Princess Buttercup. And he's pursuing them, and he's like, first stage is he has to do one of the best sword fights on film, I think, against Inigo Montoya. And then he gets past him, and Vizzini's like, oh, he's still following us. Fezzik, take care of him your way. Fezzik's like, what is my way? And Vizzini is like, and I'm sorry to Wally Shane, but get a rock, hide behind a boulder, and when he comes through, hit him on the head. And yeah, Andre the Giant, Fezzik is like, my way is not very sportsmanlike. But I'm here to tell you, even though Vizzini was the villain in that scenario, we should all try to channel our inner InfoSec Vizzinis when it comes to protecting our own networks. But before I talk about that, who am I? Why should you listen to anything I say? Well, first of all, my name is David Bianco. I'm a cybersecurity researcher. I work for Surge, which is Splunk's, one of Splunk's strategic cybersecurity research teams. So my job is to just do cybersecurity research, not really related to our products or anything like that, but just to think about how we can improve doing better defending networks and then talking about them just like I'm doing today. So I've been in security for a little bit over 20 years. Actually, when you put in IT to there, it becomes a little bit longer. Almost all that time, I've been focused on defensive operations, so blue team, incident detection and incident response, and things that are kind of adjacent to those, so threat hunting, cyber threat intelligence, things like that. I'm also a SANS certified instructor. I teach network forensics as part of the digital forensics and incident response curriculum. And some of you may remember, who was here at RVAsec number 3? Anybody? Nobody. Or if there are, I can't see them past the lights. RVAsec number 3, I was one of the first times I publicly spoke about one of the things that has followed me around my entire career is the pyramid of pain. Anybody familiar with the pyramid of pain? Yeah, a few people. So that might make a little bit of a return later on in the presentation. So, but also other things as well that I've worked on. Like more recently, my team published the Peak Threat Hunting Framework. So I was the lead author of the Peak Threat Hunting Framework, and I feel super awkward at introducing myself and talking about myself. So I'm going to skip ahead. I want us to hold a couple of, well, 3 assumptions in mind as we go through this presentation. The first one is that both on the offense and the defense side, no one, absolutely no one, is doing it just to do offense or just to do defense. We all have goals. The attackers or the threat actors, they have goals. They want to, I don't know, steal your information. Maybe they want to steal it because they want to replicate your $1 billion that you've spent in figuring out how to do a certain process. Or maybe they just want to steal all your information so they can hold it for exorbitant ransom and prevent you from using it until you pay them, or maybe even, say, you're going to have the biggest data leak in history if you don't give me $50 million, right? They have some goal. On our side, the defense side, we have goals too. Our goals are in a little bit simpler, but also a little bit more ill-defined in some ways. Our goal is basically to prevent them from doing what they want to do, whatever that is, right? We want to protect our business or our organization that we're part of. So both sides, the actors on both sides have goals. To achieve those goals, the actors on both sides are going to take certain steps, and we are mostly taking those steps in a way that looks out for our own interests. Like, barring mistakes or occasionally emotion or something like that, most of the time, both sides act in their own best interests. Like, the threat actors want to do things, not waste all of their time just playing around. They want to achieve whatever it is they're trying to achieve. We want to usually try to detect them, prevent them from achieving what they're trying to achieve with the least possible investment of resources. I will admit some actors, not just the threat actors, but even on the defensive side, are a little bit less rational than others. You might think of, on the threat actor side, there's There have been times, maybe some of you have encountered them, where they've gone out of their way to, I don't know, insult the journalists or the researchers who have been tracking them and causing them issues. On our side, sometimes, we get pressure from management, just do something right now, whatever. I'm sure no one in here has ever pressured anyone to just do something right now, but we know it happens. But mostly, both sides act in a rational fashion. And their actions are not independent entirely. Both sides react to the actions of the other sides. Very simplistic view, you can think of an attack and defense operation almost like I don't want to trivialize it and say it's a game, but think of it as a game in the sense of like game theory, right? You can think of it almost as a little game. Somebody makes the first move, somebody makes the next move, responding to that, somebody makes the move after, responding to that, somebody makes the move after. I know that there are certain times when things are in parallel or whatever like that, but think about it that way. The key, though, and there's two things in this presentation that if you forget everything else, that I want you to remember. This is the first one. As the defenders, we always get to make the first move. In fact, more than just the first move, we can make as many moves as we want before the threat actors come into the picture. They call this the first move advantage. Like, if you Google that, you'll very likely hear a lot about actual games like chess or anything like that. Because if you're developing a new game, one of the things that you have to do is make sure that you minimize the effect of the first move advantage. Anybody play Pokemon? Like the card game? Like maybe a few people. Yeah.
Not anymore.
Not anymore, he says. But yeah, one of the rules of Pokemon is if you are the first person to go, your Pokemon is not allowed to attack. That's because there's a significant advantage to being the first person to go. Otherwise, you could totally potentially wipe out the other guy's Pokemon before he has a chance to do anything. So in games, they try to minimize the first move advantage. But in cybersecurity, we need to maximize it. Because if we do things correctly, if we set things up right, we as the defenders can control the pace, tone, and style of the engagement. Who here is familiar with this idea of the defender's dilemma? Has anybody ever heard that before? A few people. Now, what if I tell you the definition of it? Defenders have to get it right every time, and attackers only have to get it right once. A few more, maybe, I hope. Anybody ever heard of that? Yeah. He says it's a marketing ploy. Yeah, I mean, it's a lie. I'll say more. It's not just a marketing ploy. It's a straight out lie. Maybe a long time ago it might have been the truth, but it is not really true. And I'll tell you a few of the different reasons why this is not true. But on that topic of it being a marketing ploy, I'm not like pointing fingers at Google and saying, Google, you're crappy because you talk about this, but high profile Google Cloud security team writes about the defender's dilemma pretty regularly these days. Like in February, you can see here, they announced this new initiative that they have to use AI to kind of close the gap of the defender's dilemma. And you can even see they called the AI Cyber Defense Initiative. This came out in February. So it's only like, what is that, a little bit less than 4 months old. In fact, I didn't put it in the presentation, but just last week, I read another one of their articles that mentions the defender's dilemma again. But here's what they had to say about it in that February article. They basically started by giving the straight up, almost dictionary definition. Main challenge in cybersecurity is that attackers need just one successful threat to break through defenses, and defenders need to deploy the best defenses all the time, everywhere. And they even call it by its name, the defender's dilemma. I've actually spent a few days trying to figure out the original publication or the original expression of the defender's dilemma. I wasn't able to find it. It's been around for as long as I can kind of remember, but so maybe nobody remembers who created it. But we're still using it today. But let me tell you, not only do I think it's not true, we'll get to why in a minute, but first I want to tell you why you should banish it from your thoughts, because it's actually harmful. The defender's dilemma has probably done more than most other things to hold back the practice of cybersecurity. Because the premise is wrong. I'll talk about this a little bit more, but basically it is no longer, if it ever was, it's no longer the case that an attacker only has to do one thing right. They never just do the first thing and then they've achieved their goal. Remember, they have goals. They're not here just to break into your network. If they were just here to break into your network, yeah, defender's dilemma. They broke in, one step maybe, they're good. The wrong premise leads to bad decisions when you are trying to make your security policies, your procedures, you're trying to figure out where to spend your time and your treasure. You're making bad decisions, not because the decisions themselves are bad, but because the input to those decisions, the premise of the defender's dilemma, is incorrect. When you are making those bad decisions, you're essentially wasting your resources. You are spending money on services or products that you may not actually need, or maybe you do need them, but they're not quite as important as you think, and so maybe you could have got by with spending a little bit less. Maybe you are hiring far too many people in one part of your security organization and not enough in the others. You're basically guaranteed, if you're operating under a flawed premise, you're making bad decisions, you are wasting your resources. When you waste your resources, your security team gets, how do they feel? How do you guys feel? I'm sorry, except for Q, who loves to have his time wasted. I don't know if you're here, but that was the premise of his talk. Please waste my time, I think was the exact title. Other than Agent Q, if you think your time is wasted at work, how do you feel? Bad, yeah, sad, demoralized. Why am I even doing this? The defender's dilemma actually sets up a failure mindset, saying that all you can do is basically stack sandbags against the flood, but it's going to overwhelm you and you're just trying to buy time, which I do not believe. When your security team doesn't believe that the work they're doing is meaningful, are they actually able to accomplish meaningful work? Like maybe some, but more by accident or more by superheroics on the individual's part. They get bad security outcomes. You encourage the bad security outcomes just because you started from the wrong premise. So let me tell you a little bit about why this is wrong. The basic idea that I hate about the defender's dilemma is that it tells you that the attackers only have to do things right one time, which implies that their entire cycle of attack, the entire thing they're doing is one event. But we know that that's not true because we look at things like the Lockheed Martin cyber kill chain or the Mandiant attack life cycle, and there's other ones as well that are life cycles. Like the cyber kill chain, I'll admit, it blew my mind the first time I saw it. Like, great, one of the foundational models of cybersecurity. It starts with, it has 7 different phases that the attackers go through. And I know it doesn't apply equally well to all types of attacks, but the idea behind it still holds for every single attack. There are phases that the attackers have to go through. In the kill chain, the exploitation, phase 4, right in the middle, that's what they mean in the defender's dilemma when they say they have to get it right one time. That's the one time. But if you look at the life cycle, you'll see that that's not true. They have 3 phases before, and they have another 3 phases after. The exploitation is exactly in the middle of that life cycle model. In fact, when you look at the life cycle in terms of how much calendar time or wall time the attackers spend, they actually probably spend a lot more time after because of that last phase is pretty big. The actions on objectives, that's where they end up spending most of their time. So that exploitation phase happens fairly early on in the process of their attack. But the defender's dilemma thinks that is the attack. That's a point in time, but that's not true. Attacks are actually multiple points spread along time. So if you, as a defender, can pick up on any of those points, you have the opportunity to detect that something bad is going on and hopefully interdict to keep them from achieving their goal. But even if not entirely successful at that, you have the ability to get involved pretty early, hopefully. Even if they're almost to their goal, or even if they have only just started to achieve their goal. Like, I can't count the number of times that I've been able to keep the data exfiltration from happening, even though I couldn't keep the data staging from happening. Or even sometimes when I've been able to stop the data exfiltration and process and limit the damage. Like, we don't have to always be successes 100% or 0%, right? But attacks happen over time. So we actually have a lot of opportunities to detect and respond to that attack that the defender's dilemma doesn't really address. Here's the other thing, the second of the 2 things that if you forget everything else, this is the second of the 2 things that I want you to remember. Who remembers the first? Does anybody? Defenders always get the first move, right? And I did not create this, I will say, we call this now the attacker's dilemma. I don't actually know who created this, although I have a good friend and mentor of mine, Richard Baitlick, who I think was the first time that I heard it from. Attackers have to get it right throughout the entire attack life cycle. They have to do all of their activities through the entire cycle without tripping our defenses, without being detected, without running against our countermeasures. As defenders, we only need to detect them once before we can get on the trail and start our incident response process. So in reality, in today's environment, it is actually flipped. It's not the defender's dilemma anymore, it's the attacker's dilemma. The attacker has to do everything right across their entire life cycle, or they risk putting the defense on notice that there's something bad and giving them a chance to get in and involved. So remember when I said this earlier, defenders always get the first move. Actually, they can have as many moves as they want. So that leads us to a few different strategies. The first one, I'm sorry to say, is super boring. You definitely did not come to this conference hoping to hear that I was going to tell you to eat your cyber vegetables and do all the things that everyone's already telling you to do. I'm sorry to tell you this, but it is actually important if you want to have a defensible network. You're going to have to pay attention to what we consider the basics of cybersecurity. I don't really like the idea of best practices. Like side rant, I think best practices mean we don't have any data to back this up. But in this case, let's just say follow the best practices. So do things like enable multi-factor authentication when feasible. Make sure, of course, you're doing your software updates and your patching. You have an asset inventory so you know what computers and devices are on your network and who their owners and typical users are. Maybe have a software inventory. Anybody have an allergic reaction to S-bombs? Like, you should know, hopefully, not only what software you're running, but what software your software is composed of, what software your software is running. None of these are very fun, I admit. I'm sorry if there's somebody in here who's like, no, this is what I live for. None of these are that fun. But think of them as when you are about to play a game. Again, sorry to trivialize it, but I think of it in game theory. But in this time, I'm thinking of an actual game. Like you're going to play Settlers of Catan, or you're going to play Monopoly. What's the first thing you do? You set up the board. That's right.
I was going to say
Buy stuff. But yes, buy stuff is what the CISOs say their first move is, and steal the money when no one's looking. I admire that, but but only in actual games. No, you set up the board, and that's what all this is. This is basically the cybersecurity equivalent of setting up the board, but it's not like Catan or chess where there are rules about how you have to set up the board. And if you don't follow the rules, you can't play the game because somebody's going to say you cheated. Part of setting up the board in cybersecurity is setting it up the way you like it, not the way they like it, because we don't have to be fair to the other side, right? So if we decide that we want to, I don't know, I'm just making this up, double down on endpoint monitoring, fine, great, do it. I've never really been involved in a situation where somebody came to me and goes, if only we had less monitoring, that would solve all of our problems. Depending on your threat model, you might say, well, okay, endpoint monitoring is good, but what I really need is security awareness in my user community or my customer community. Whatever that is, whatever makes most sense and would give you the most advantage, do those. Basically, all this stuff happens more or less before the threat actors even know that they're about to play the game. So take advantage of that. Spend the time and effort, engage your security architects, maybe sit them down and say, look, I know you think the defender's dilemma is a thing. It's not. We're going to do the attacker's dilemma. And now step one is we're going to set up the board to create as much problem for the threat actor as we can. Yeah, there it is, he says. There's the pyramid. The next of the pillars that I really emphasize is our ability to impose a cost on the threat actors. And that is not a cost of like, oh, we're going to charge you $10.27 to hack us, although that would be awesome. It is a cost of increase, the cost of doing business, of their doing business against us. So in 2013, I published this thing called the Pyramid of Pain. And I will give a very brief overview of it now, just for the benefit of those of you who may not have encountered it before. If you're interested in learning more about it, find me after. I have these nice little buttons. I'll be happy to give you a button of the Pyramid of Pain. It has a little URL on it so you can go to and learn more about it. But the Pyramid of Pain is a defensive model. In fact, it's about how to turn your incident detection and incident response from a purely reactive, defensive capability into an offensive capability to increase the threat actor's cost of doing business. All the layers on the pyramid, which, by the way, is just like Microsoft Smart Art, is probably the most influential cybersecurity Microsoft Smart Art I'm aware of, because I can't do any drawing, so I couldn't have even made this by hand. I needed Microsoft PowerPoint for this. But every level on the pyramid is a different type of common indicator of compromise, or IOC, that you might use to detect when a threat actor is active in your system. The idea is, if you, for any of these, if you know a specific indicator from that threat actor, and if you are able to leverage your defense, your incident detection and incident response capability to notice when they use it and start your response early enough that you can kind of interdict them when they use it, if they want to complete their goal, and remember, they have a goal, if they want to complete their attack and achieve their goal, they have to replace that indicator with something else. Some things are very easy or trivial for them to change. They don't cause them very much pain. That's the lower things here, the hash values of malware, or the IP addresses or domain names that they use in their download sites or their command and control sites or something like that. Usually they don't really have a problem. Change a bit in the malware, you got an entirely new static hash. If I find your IP, no problem. There's 100 million more in my botnet that I'm renting. I'll just switch to a new IP, no big deal. Domain names are kind of the same too, although they do require that extra step of registration with a registrar before they can use it, and that typically costs them a little money, but that's only if they're playing by the rules too. If they've got somebody's stolen credit card or something like that, who knows, right? Or, and I've never run into this and verified, but some of the nation state kind of threat actors may actually run their own domain registrars, and they may not have a problem with these at all. It's like at the top, though, where you start annoying them. The artifacts of communication, the way they create their C2 URLs, or the headers that they use in their HTTP communication, the registry entries that they leave behind, or something that typically requires them to go change in the code. It might just be a string that they have to change, but then they have to recompile that code and redistribute it to change that. At the tools level, those minor changes that they make are not good enough anymore, because you have more robust capability of finding the tools that they're using. And so your detections survive any kind of minor URL format changes or something like that. And then at the very top is TTPs. Who has an opinion on what TTP stands for? Who knows? Just yell it. Yes, tactics, techniques, and procedures. Now, who wants to tell me in one word what that actually means? I will say behavior. Like, at the time I wrote this, I will admit the phrase TTP was hot. But also, I couldn't fit behaviors in the tiny little pyramid at the top of the pyramid. So TTPs. But it's basically behaviors. It's how they learned how to be a threat actor, how they trained and practiced. And if you've ever had to quit a habit or change your daily routine, you know that that can sometimes be very difficult. So if you detect one behavior and they have to replace it with a new behavior, fine. If they want to, they probably do that. The more of those that you detect, though, and you take away from them, the harder it is. So pyramid is a very good, I mean, obviously biased, but it's a very good way of structuring your incident detection and response programs to kind of shift some of the burden onto the threat actor. Spend less person time going after domains, IPs, and hashes, and more person time going after like tool level and behavior stuff. I will also say, like, we're all in the industry, almost all of us are in the industry. You probably have heard in the last year or two, one of the hot words is resilience. I don't know what resilience means. But I will tell you, if a system is resilient, like not just one service, but if your network is resilient, it is more able to resist the minor things that the threat actors do to it. So that's another way, like when you're hearing the marketing, and my own company talks about resilience a lot too, so I'm certainly not throwing shade on it. But resilient systems actually have a tangible benefit because they increase the cost of the threat actors. They can't just poke the fragile thing and it falls over anymore. You might think anything else that you could do in your organization that is more of a proactive defense. Now, I'm not talking only about firewalls and antivirus and things like that, although they could be part of that. I'm more thinking of, let's talk about threat hunting. I mean, I'm a big fan of threat hunting, closely associated with threat hunting. And I see like threat hunting as one aspect of it is finding the security incidents in your network that your automated systems miss. So that's a very proactive detection. So anything that you can do proactively to make it more difficult for threat actors to operate without detection, totally worth it. All these things are ways to impose cost. And in your environments, you probably all have different things that you can think of that might only apply to your industry or even your specific organization. Look for those. Those are real opportunities that you may be leaving on the table. The third of the big pillars here is deception, or as I like to say, lie and cheat your assets off. So if you were in here for Agent Q's presentation right before mine, this is basically what he talked about. Not just deception technology, honeypots, but he also talked about honey users and honey tokens and things that you can do to make his job as a red teamer harder. That is gold. I'm not going to go into that in detail. I had planned to talk a little bit more about it, but not so much detail anyway. Definitely go and look at his presentation when it comes out on YouTube. There's also, I can recommend a book by a friend of mine, Chris Sanders, wrote one 2 years or maybe 3 years ago called Intrusion Detection Honeypots. Really good orientation to it, focusing mostly on like free software. You don't necessarily, if you've paid attention, I've never said go out and buy anything. Some of these things you might decide to buy something to implement it, like especially when I said about the cyber vegetables, maybe you'll get a two-factor authentication solution from a vendor, right? But you don't have to all the time. Everything I'm asking you to consider can be done for free. And there are free tools available for all these, but that's especially true with the deception technology. There's a lot of commercial free stuff like the Canary tokens, and there's a lot of free open source software that can help you set up traps and snares and things all around your network to make it more difficult for those threat actors. Let them waste their time, because when they set those off, they start interacting with those. You should be alerting on those, but it also wastes their time because it stalls them in the progress of their attack life cycle, giving you more time to respond. So yes, definitely look for any opportunity to deceive, lie to your attackers, all kinds of stuff. It is surprisingly easy to get started with this, but once you get started, it is also surprisingly deep that you can go without even spending a dime. So, wrap it up, David. We want to get to the prize drawings. Or the beer, right? I just want to leave you with a few final closing thoughts. The first one is, if you haven't figured it out by now, hate the defender's dilemma. It sets you up to have what I call a disadvantage mindset. And that disadvantage mindset, as we saw, I think it leads you to make bad decisions. It has a bad impact on your entire security team. And from there, if you're making bad decisions based on an incorrect premise, you can only have bad security outcomes. So I don't like the defender's dilemma, and I would like to believe that everyone is going to leave this room totally convinced that it's bad. If I haven't convinced you, maybe talk to me afterwards and I'll give it another shot. There are a lot of opportunities that we have, though, to impose the attacker's dilemma. Look for opportunities in your own daily work lives to make it more difficult, either through how you set up the board, maybe how you structure some of your processes, with threat hunting, or maybe incorporating the pyramid into detection engineering, things like that. And then finally, just remember that the attackers don't do what they're doing totally in a vacuum. They are forced to play in the world that we provide them to play in. And when we're actually in there actively engaging, that also further forces them to do the things that we want them to do and take reaction to our actions. This all means, and this to tie this back to the actual title, between the way we set up the board, between the way we can impose cost, and between the way we lie and cheat from them, we have a lot of opportunities to basically, I hate sports metaphors, but this idea of a forced error is what we want. We want to put them in situations where they are more likely than not to make an error, to waste their time, to let us detect them easily so that we can notice and do something about it. And it doesn't have to cost a whole lot. So with that, thank you for coming. I very much appreciate it, and I understand that I have a little bit of time if we have some questions. Everyone's asleep. I can barely see, so I can see a hand over here.
Just a quick question about canary tokens and honeypots and things like that. Is there ever enough of setting up canary tokens within your environment? I guess that's my question.
Okay, yes.
Is there like a maximum amount you should be, a maximum amount you should be setting up, or is there a range, stuff like that?
Okay, yeah, so the question is, is there do you ever get tired of creating new tokens, new canary tokens, or is there too much deception? The answer is probably yes, but I don't know that I've ever encountered too much deception. Like, for this, depending on the size of your organization, let's just consider the number of users that you have as one thing. Like, maybe one of the strategies would be to insert a few fake users. I think Agent Q talked about this in his talk, right? So you have a few fake users in your Active Directory that no one actually ever uses. So if anybody logs in or tries to get a ticket for those accounts, you can flag that, right? I don't know the answer if you have 10 versus you have 100. Is it more effective? And maybe there's even a point of diminishing returns where the more you have, the more likely you are to have innocent, non-malicious things blunder into them. I don't know. If anyone in here is doing a master's degree and wants to have a good master's topic, I would suggest that's a really good question that I don't know has been answered. Any other questions? If I don't see you, just call out because I got bright lights shining at me. All right, it looks like none. So with that, thank you very much.